Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth, and how Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth is a game changer for Dungeons and Dragons specifically. All right, so I'm going to point you to Rudy over on Alpha Investments. If you don't know who Rudy is, I'm going to tell you real quick. He is part of MTG Finance. So you'll hear this term used, and basically it's people who buy Magic the Gathering as a business who really aren't in that business, right? So to my knowledge, I don't think Rudy has a shop, right? He started by buying Magic as an investment, right? And so and when he started, and you can go all the way back on his channel, he had just like, everybody was like, ooh, how cool your collection. And he would have these binders just filled with, foil rares that you've never even had in your collection. Entire binders of cards that you've never even owned, right? Like just super high, and literally millions of dollars of Magic cards, right? In binders, right? That's when he started, right? What's really interesting is, like, he used to have these super shiny binders. Now there's no shiny binders. You know what his flex is right now? Sitting in a warehouse with cardboard boxes filled with sealed product. And there's millions of dollars on the line, right? And so he did this video and he said, hey, wake up. Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth is a complete game changer. It will change the way it will change the way Hasbro distributes Magic the Gathering going forward. So he talked about this 30th edition reprint of the Black Lotus. He used the term brand damage. It did brand damage to Magic the Gathering. Literally, global banks were like talking about Magic the Gathering openly. Like you don't hear like Magic the Gathering, a card game, being talked about in quarterly reports for global banks. And this is why I have such a hard time taking like OSE seriously, or Knave seriously, or whatever indie or OSR game you play seriously, because like nothing that happens on them matters at a global scale. But things that happen on Dungeons and Dragons do matter on a global scale. And you're just like, well, Scott, Magic the Gathering is not Dungeons and Dragons. Seal your flapping maw. You're absolutely wrong, right? In fact, you will hear Dungeons & Dragons mentioned in the video I pointed you to. The video where Rudy says, this is an absolute game changer, right? Like, this changes everything about Magic. And get this, Magic is eternally connected now to Dungeons & Dragons. Magic the Gathering is eternally connected to Dungeons & Dragons. So what does this have to do with Dungeons & Dragons? First of all, here's the headline from Rudy's video. Here's the meat, right? Spit out the bones. Here's the meat. Rudy says that he thinks this one set is going to mean $50 to $100 million for Hasbro. One set, $50 to $100 million, right? And Hasbro's going to get their cut, and the Tolkien State's going to get their cut, right? And what comes after that, right? Tolkien State's going to be like, hey, you guys just dropped 30, 40, $60 million on us. Maybe Rudy's wrong, and it's 200 or 300 million, right? Like, and so, so Tolkien State's like, hey, we got Learjets to buy, man. You guys are the only, and trust and believe, OSC ain't gonna buy no Learjet for anybody, right? But Dungeons and Dragons can. Let's talk about how Dungeons and Dragons is involved in Learjet purchase discussions, right? Like, so basically, this is going to be massively successful. Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth. And actually, I need you guys to understand, Rudy is saying the reserve list doesn't even matter. He's like, oh, you got a bunch of Mox Emeralds, Mox Diamonds. Nobody gives a crap. You got a Bilbo, you got a Frodo, you got an Eowyn, you got Strider, the cool Strider, not the white one, right? Like, we're here, right? Like, this is different, right? And even beyond that, it looks like Magic the Gathering has just changed canon for Lord of the Rings, right? And you're like, I don't know about it. You better recognize, man. This is for realsies, right? Like, Dungeons and Dragons changes canon on a lot of stuff, right? That's entire reason why intellectual properties connect to it. Lego right now, right? Oh, hey, we got this great toy. You can sit on your shelf and do nothing with it. Oh, we just connected to Dungeons and Dragons. You can tell stories with it forever. What kind of stories? Every kind of story, right? There's the figure you need to tell a Dungeons and Dragons story, but you can use those Dungeons and Dragons rules and you can tell the story of Lego City. Like when you connect to Dungeons and Dragons, all the product does is tell stories, right? It's astounding, right? So Rudy is saying that the reserve list doesn't even matter anymore. All those old cards don't even matter anymore. The hot, fresh money is chasing the new stuff, right? Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth. So the conversation, in my humble opinion, is going to go, Hasbro's going to go, hey, here's your $60 million Tolkien estate. And they're like, hey, great start, right? We're going to buy 3 Learjets with that. We need 3 more, right? What do you got next, right? And here's how the conversation is going to go. They're going to say, well, we can certainly do another print run, right? But you guys want to push the boundaries, right? You have an exciting classic intellectual property that's really valuable, right? We have this thing called Dungeons and Dragons. Have you ever watched Stranger Things? I think you have, because it's the biggest streaming show on the planet. And even you Tolkien estate people got time for that, right? And Stranger Things has been hard. Dungeons and Dragons has been the heart of Stranger Things, the biggest streaming show on the planet for 5 years, right? They're coming up on season 5, right? The show's been made for like 6, 7, 8 years, right? With D&D at its heart. Oh, have you guys watched Legends of Vox Machina? It's over on... Oh, you don't watch Netflix? Maybe watch Amazon Prime, owned by Jeff Bezos, who you, like, go onto a yacht. Maybe Amazon Prime was playing on Jeff Bezos' yacht when you were visiting him. Did you see Legends of Vox Machina? That's D&D too, right? Like, and that's the point, right? Like, they bring juice. And what's really amazing is OSE. Who owns them? I don't know. Who cares, right? Like some schlub company that can go out of business tomorrow, right? Dungeons and Dragons has layers and layers and layers of protection. It's been with Hasbro for 2 decades, right? Because if the sales on Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition were so low, right? So low that it was outsold by Pathfinder. Dungeons & Dragons' greatest embarrassment, greatest shame to be outsold by a copy of your own game. Just the, like, people, sackcloth and ashes in Washington State, like in the Wizards of the Coast offices. They must have been ashamed. I mean, to be outsold by Pathfinder, can you think of a fate lower, a fate more embarrassing, right? That should never happen. Dungeons & Dragons should never be outsold by a copy game, right? Like, so when 4th edition came out, 2008 to 2014, there were terrible sales problems. The game was in legit trouble, right? But it was okay because Magic the Gathering was still selling strong. And it was okay because Peppa Pig was still selling strong. Everything that Hasbro has is layers of protection, which means they don't need to hire to some international billionaire or some Silicon Valley billionaire. Whereas OSE, that could get swept up, right? Look at Earth Dawn. Earth Dawn's had, like, it just gets bounced around, they do a print run, nobody buys it, and then it just gets shoved off to the next company, right? Like, and that's the point is, Dungeons & Dragons has been stable for 25 years, same owner, right? It's only had 3 owners in the entirety of almost 50 years. That's a good run, right? And so that 50 to 100 million means that Dungeons & Dragons is even more protected from having to sell to the next, to some international billionaire or some Silicon Valley billionaire, right? So that's good. But then one thing that's really interesting is there was talk literally last year. There are people saying, "Hey, we think that they're wrapping up Dungeons & Dragons to be sold." I don't think that's the case. And one of the things that's really interesting now is if you sell Dungeons & Dragons, whoever buys it gets a stake. What do they get a stake in, right? They get a stake in Magic the Gathering, right? Whoever buys Dungeons and Dragons, and this is why it's not going to be sold and why it's safe as houses, right? Anybody who buys Dungeons and Dragons gets Ravnica, gets Theros, gets Strixhaven, all canon MTG settings. They get Innistrad, Kaladesh, Dominaria, several others. I think there's like 10 settings that are canon to D&D, canon to Magic the Gathering. So anybody who buys Dungeons and Dragons gets a stake in Magic the Gathering. Oh, who's in Magic the Gathering? Post Malone, Ariana Grande, Post Malone, Fortnite, and Lord of the Rings. Right? You buy Dungeons and Dragons, you get a stake in Magic the Gathering, which contains hundreds of worlds. Right? You buy Dungeons and Dragons, you get a stake in Lego. Right? They're no longer separate products. They've been mixed. It's a soup. They're mixed now. And you're not going to be able to take... And it's not carrots. This is the bouillon. It's mixed. Right? And that's incredible. And I'm telling you right now, what's happening... Rudy from Alpha Investments is 100% right. 100% right. He is correct to say that that this is a game changer for Magic the Gathering. The party's missing is Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth is a game changer for Dungeons and Dragons. And so is Lord of the Rings canon to D&D? Not yet. It's about 1 centimeter away from it. So basically, OSE, Knave, Pathfinder, right? Like, just scrub OSR games that, just copy games, right? Are they canon to D&D? No. They're so here's Dungeons and Dragons. You have to drive 50 miles out, and that's how far they are away from D&D canon. Okay? D&D canon. Strixhaven, inside the building of Dungeons and Dragons canon. Inside the building. Right? Now, where is Magic the Gathering, Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth? It's outside the canon of D&D. But it's sitting next to the wall. It's literally... if it's in one of those, those containers, those uniform containers that they carry on the back of semi-trucks, right? They've shoved that directly to the wall of canon. They can hear each other knock through the wall, right? And all it's going to take to get that in there now is just cut a hole in the wall and shove it through. That's exactly what they did with Ravnica. It's exactly what they did with Theros. It's exactly what they did with Strixhaven. It's exactly what they did with Innistrad. It's exactly what they did with Kaladesh. So they can squawk Universe Beyond. Oh, Universe Beyond? Do you mean it's connected to D&D Beyond? Is that what Universe Beyond means? Oh, it's connected to D&D Beyond? Both have the same word at the end, so that we know they're together, right? Is that what you mean? Right? So they can squawk Universe Beyond all they want. Everybody can see it. It's a centimeter away from canon, right? And I really believe Lord of the Rings is on a march to be D&D canon. Very, very interesting. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when we get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.